we also see changes in cognitive development. There are two components of lifespan intelligence. Hopefully you guys remember fluid and crystallized intelligence because this maps on perfectly to the mechanics and pragmatics of intelligence. So the two-component model of lifespan intelligence is grounded in this dynamic interplay among biopsychosocial forces. The mechanics of intelligence is more directly an expression of the neurophysiological architecture of the mind. So the mechanics, again, is going to be like your fluid intelligence, right? So that's going to be more your ability to learn, cognitive speed, cognitive processing, whereas the pragmatics is going to kind of be more like your semantic knowledge, your Jeopardy knowledge, your crystallized intelligence. So the pragmatics of intelligence is associated more with the bodies of knowledge that are available from and mediated through one's culture. It's more closely associated then with psychological and sociocultural forces. At the psychological level, knowledge structures change as a function of the accumulated acquisition of knowledge over time. At the sociocultural level, knowledge structures are also influenced by how we are socialized given the particular historical period in which we are raised. So given that biological and genetic forces govern the mechanics more, we see that over time there's this downward trajectory with age. But given that the pragmatics of intelligence is governed more by environmental and cultural factors, there's an upward trajectory maintained across the adult lifespan. Now, some theorists believe that a general slowing of the central nervous system functioning really underlies nearly all age-related declines in cognitive performance. Let's move on and discuss personality. So, maybe you guys are familiar with the 5-factor trait model, but maybe you're not. So we're going to kind of do an overview of this. A helpful way to remember the 5-factor model is by remembering the acronym OCEAN, O-C-E-A-N. So the 5-factor trait model of personality basically says there are 5 factors that we can use to describe somebody's personality. Openness to experience involves having a vivid imagination and dream life. Usually, like, how creative are you? How much do you like the arts or literature? Conscientiousness involves, like, are you hardworking? How hardworking are you? Extroversion, how much do you thrive on social interaction? How much do you like to talk? Agreeableness, this has to do with how accepting are you, how willing are you to work with others, how caring are you. And the neuroticism has to do with like your anxiety or how hostile you are, self-conscious, depressed, impulsive, and vulnerable. So this is the 5-factor model. I'm going to post a link that you guys can take. I'd like everyone to take it so you can see where you are on these different personality dimensions, and you can learn more about these different dimensions as well. But when it comes to development, one thing that we see is that there's some change to personality over time. So what do you think would happen as we age? Well, typically extroversion and openness to experience decrease with age, but agreeableness increases with age. We see that conscientiousness peaks in midlife, and then neuroticism pretty much disappears, or it's very much less apparent in later life. So how can we think more about this? We see that personality is mostly stable, but there is some change when we look at longitudinal studies. Very old people show increases in suspiciousness and sensitivity. And part of this could be explained by increased wariness of victimization in older adulthood. My grandparents just got a scam call, and there was someone pretending to actually be my little brother to my grandparents. And it's very scary because people can like look up this information, and older adults are definitely at risk for being scammed. And so they knew my little brother's name, and they were pretending to be him, and asking for money. Luckily, my grandparents did not fall victim to it. We see that extroversion and openness decrease with age, and then agreeableness increases. So, one thing that we can think about is we can look at these researchers, Staudinger and colleagues, and they reconcile findings that show that there's both stability in personality as well as change in personality. So they define these terms personality adjustment and personality growth. So here, personality adjustment are those developmental changes in terms of adaptive value and functioning. So adjustment is shown by absences of neuroticism, this presence of agreeableness and conscientiousness. These traits are associated with adjustment because that person becomes less emotionally volatile. They're more attuned to social demands and roles. And these characteristics allow older adults to maintain and regain levels of well-being in the face of loss, threats, and challenges. Now, growth is going to be a lot more rare than adjustment is going to be. Personality growth involves those ideal end states. We see that openness declines over time. So this kind of shows that personality growth is rare. There appear to be more increases in adjustment aspects of personality with increasing age rather than growth. Also because growth is harder. But these findings of adjustment and growth can explain why we see both stability and change in personality. Another thing that's changing in midlife are priorities. Change is really the rule in midlife. According to Erickson, middle-aged adults become more concerned with doing for others and passing social values and skills to the next generation. This is a set of behaviors and beliefs labeled as generativity. Those who do not achieve generativity are thought to experience stagnation. It's the opposite of generativity, where you're unable to deal with your children's needs or mentoring younger adults. So middle-aged people here are focusing more on parenting, mentoring, volunteering. They might become a foster grandparent. Let's talk more about Erickson's 7th stage here of generativity versus stagnation. So this is the conflict in midlife. Generativity begins in early adulthood, and it expands greatly in midlife. Parenting is a major means of realizing generativity, but adults can also be generative in other ways, such as through forms of creativity. So generativity brings together personal desires and cultural demands. Middle-aged adults feel this need to make a contribution that will survive their death. So they want to reach out to others in ways that give to and guide the next generation. They're extending commitment beyond themselves and beyond their partner. And this can be realized through a variety of ways. It's not just parenting. The negative outcome of midlife then is stagnation, and this occurs when people, after attaining certain life goals, become pretty self-centered and self-indulgent. So they show a lack of interest in young people and focus on what they can get from others, not what they can do or what they can give. So studies of generativity do show that it tends to increase in midlife. Highly generative people have some similar characteristics. They appear especially well-adjusted. They're more open to differing viewpoints. They possess leadership qualities. They desire more from their work rather than financial rewards. And they just really care about others and the welfare of their children, their partner, their aging parents, wider society. So generativity is associated with more effective child rearing. And stagnation, you guys, it's just the opposite. You just don't even care about anyone beyond yourself. either you have little interest in being productive at work or developing talents. You're just focused, you have a very inward focus. You have not been able to switch that focus from inward to now outward to others. And then the last thing that I want to discuss with you guys today are life transitions in midlife. So studies indicate that a midlife crisis is really not a universal experience for middle-aged adults. Only 1/4 of MIDAS respondents said that they had experienced what they would consider a midlife crisis. The few midlifers who are in crisis typically have had early adulthoods in which gender roles, family pressure, low income, or poverty just really limited their ability to fulfill personal needs and goals. So what we see is more of a midlife correction. Here, adults are reevaluating their roles and their dreams. They're making necessary adjustments. So we see that there's this reorganization of self and values across the lifespan. And this is really driven by these more cognitive changes here. So midlife adults actually show the most complex understanding of self, emotions, and motivations. So cognitive complexity is the strongest predictor of higher levels of complexity in general. So the midlife crisis may really be the result of these general gains in cognitive complexity from early to middle adulthood. And this can contribute then to this midlife correction. So there was a study done on women. There were 2 investigations of women in their early 40s. And what they found was that those who acknowledged regret without making life changes reported less favorable psychological well-being and poorer physical health over time. So these people didn't make a midlife correction, and that was not good for their overall well-being compared to those who did. By late midlife, those who come to terms with their disappointments report better physical health and greater life satisfaction than those who don't. So basically, this idea of a midlife correction is a more accurate way to describe the so-called midlife crisis.